Part one of this presentation is on nonlinearity. To accomplish a change in thinking, educators must examine their own personal mastery and mental models of education. That's what we do here. This is a little research article about knowledge of results, which means leading with you are going to do X, Y, or Z, and when you do X, Y, or Z, you will get these results. And so knowledge of results is putting information before experience. Blog, based on research, is about nonlinear versus learning. So there's 7 principles of nonlinear pedagogy. So the first principle is that humans are complex adaptive systems and movements emerge under constraint. The second principle, becoming stable, adaptable, and responsive, which to me is like what it's all about. Because when we're on stage, we don't want to be in our heads. We don't want to be thinking, how do we do this? We just want to be able to do it and do it in response to what's around us. If we're in a musical, it might be a scene partner that's changing the line that leads us into songs. We've got to respond to that. Or maybe the music is less loud than we're used to it. We've got to respond to that. We've got to be ready for anything that happens. So being stable, adaptable, and responsive requires variability in practice. Third principle, skill learning, formation of perception action coupling. So it's not just doing it, but it's also how it's sensed, what's happening on a sensory level, which we know from last year's book club about fascia. The brain has prioritized sensation over movement 3 times. There are 3 times the sensory nerves to motor nerves. So to be able to do it is good, but it becomes more resilient when we're able to link up what we perceived when we did that. When I did that, I felt placement between my eyes. When I did that, I felt my jaw drop. When I did that, I felt my torso brace. The fourth principle is keep it simple. This is a quote from Nick Winkelman, who wrote The Language of Coaching, a book that I cannot read slow enough because it's just so juicy. Your words become your athlete's thoughts. Our fifth principle, in the words of Nora Bateson, meet the problem, don't match it. Don't try to solve a problem, provide an experience where a student will make discoveries surrounding the problem. Ask questions. Understand what your student is experiencing and where they're confused. Too often, we assume. And it's pretty amazing when we take nothing for granted and we ask questions, we ask for feedback about what they thought, what they felt, what they sensed, where they're confused, and they'll tell you something that you didn't predict. And this is where those lines, that very permeable line between teacher and student is very blurry because they'll feed back to you something you didn't consider and it will make you grow. The sixth principle is your student has learned when their behavior has changed. And this is one of the dangers of knowledge of results. If a student has intellectual information, they could tell you what the right answer is, but if their singing hasn't shifted, then they haven't solved the problem. They can read all the voice books in the world, but if their jaw still is immobile, then all that knowledge isn't very useful to them. So if we prioritize experience over information, they can come up with the words that you wanted to share, and that's even more powerful for them to synthesize, just as we do in this community and I'm doing right now. The seventh is change takes time. There are lots of time scales at play in learning. The mind understands really quickly. 2 plus 2 is 4. Look at these 2 apples, look at those 2 apples, put them together. Now you have 4 apples. Ah, I see that. But the body learns through variation, play and rest. So you can have 4 apples, but you still don't know apples. You know apples when you try lots of apples, that some apples are crunchy, some are sweet, some are soft, some are sour, some are red, some are green. So through exploring lots of possible apples, then you get concept of apple and what is in common and what makes an apple an apple. So that's similar to the way the body learns: exploration, play, rest, consideration, imagination. And so that's a longer period to adaptation than just the logic, the information that the mind latches onto, the IQ. So the body learns through KQ, and beyond that, fascia remodels slowly, and learning to sing is remodeling. Just like a ballet dancer taking hip hop, they will change their tissues if they keep taking hip hop. So lyric soprano might belt a little bit today, but she might not become a belter for a little while. And then we've got this other thing that is part of our world that's best left to another kind of professional, which is trauma, which is a part of our body and stored in our tissues to some degrees, both literal and metaphorical. So there's lots going on at all times. These are the results. So both groups improved. The linear group did better than the nonlinear group compared to what is objectively right. But the nonlinear group had more ways to do a forehand. They were more adaptable. The linear players who had the best movement criterion scores had the lowest accuracy scores. So they were more focused on what the stroke should look like rather than getting the ball where it needs to be in a game. The best accuracy score was performed by a player from the nonlinear group. Following a retention test, the linear pedagogy groups showed less variability in accuracy scores, meaning that they maintained their results, where the linear group had a higher drop off in accuracy. So focusing on right answers didn't necessarily serve them for remembering it, doing it well in the context, or over time. Now back to the one that's within the voice context. What's interesting here is a very similar thing. In a linear approach, there may be more of a attained right way, but in a nonlinear approach, there might be more than one possible right answer that emerges. In a linear approach, it may become too dysfunctionally goal-oriented. While in a nonlinear approach, there might be adaptability that emerges. In a linear approach, there may be less accuracy over time, but in nonlinearity, the accuracy might be maintained more long term.